G'day. Trooper Cody and Steve with the first of a new series of videos, and they are about policing, law enforcement, but policing and law enforcement in the day of the horse. And so my first police story comes from the Old West, and it's one of my favourite stories. Now when I first start, don't think you know the answer, because I bet you don't. But there was a guy called Pat Garrett, and he was a very famous marshal, sheriff, and everyone seems to know of him because of Billy the Kid. And everyone seems to have heard of the outlaw Billy the Kid. So Pat Garrett, born in 1850, by 1880 he's the sheriff of Lincoln County, New Mexico. The Lincoln County wars break out. Billy the Kid is a young person involved in that conflict, and he's wanted for murder. 1881, Pat Garrett kills Billy the Kid and sort of becomes a worldwide household name. Pat Garrett retires from law enforcement and takes up farming. He's in his late 50s when he does this, but he realises he doesn't like farming, so he leases his farm. Now at this point, if you're a cop or an ex-cop, or you've got family that was a cop, what's the biggest thing police are ever involved in? Neighbourhood disputes. So Pat Garrett doesn't like farming, so he decides to lease his farm to someone else. The guy who he leases it to decides to stock nearly 2,000 goats on Pat Garrett's farm. Pat is not happy with this. Somebody offers to buy the farm off Pat. There's some discussion about how many goats are there. What's the farm really worth? So Pat Garrett, who is in conflict with his person leasing his farm, agrees to ride out with a potential buyer to examine the farm. When they're riding out there, what is alleged to happen is the person leasing the farm rides up, friendly, and then Pat Garrett pulls his gun for no reason, and so the neighbour, the person leasing the land, pulls out his gun, shoots and kills Pat Garrett, and the two of them, the person who was going to buy the farm allegedly, and the goat man, race back to town, where the shooter, the killer, says to the sheriff, "I have shot and killed Pat Garrett, but I did it in self-defense." There's a trial, and in those days, New Mexico, the Wild West, it's 1908 when this happened. In those days, self-defense, as you can imagine, the goat man was acquitted. What happened, however, is that another law enforcement officer finds this very hard to believe. He rides to where Pat Garrett was shot and killed, and when he gets there, first thing he thinks is what a perfect ambush site it is. He then rides behind a very large rock, and what does he find? He finds several separate piles of horse poo. What this shows is that the ambush site where Pat Garrett was shot and killed, somebody had been waiting at least all that night on a horse, because the horse had done so many separate poos in the same spot. This shot down the theory that the goat man just rode up innocently and Pat Garrett pulled his gun and the goat man had to shoot and kill Pat Garrett. What it showed was a conspiracy, premeditation. Somebody was planning an ambush for Pat Garrett. What happened about that? Absolutely nothing. Nothing at all. Never pursued, never followed up. the guy who said he did it when he hadn't actually done it. Why did he say he did it? Because he knew he'd be acquitted, he'd get away with it. And so that is one case of when justice did not happen and Pat Garrett was not avenged. If you think that's too sad though, just remember the story is that Pat Garrett did sneak up on Billy the Kid when Billy the Kid was in a house, in bed, asleep, and Pat Garrett shot and killed him when he was in bed asleep. Pat Garrett said that's not what happened. Maybe that's for some other time. Long video. Hope you enjoyed the first one about policing. Cheers. Subscribe if you like it. Thank you.